Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It feels great to be in an actual room with actual people, even though still masked, thinking about the future with hope and optimism. Feels like an act of rebellion. The discussion and debate that happen at Princeton Future events give rise to good ideas and even great ones, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of those today. As has been pointed out, I chair the Municipal Planning Board. Some other members of the board are also here. Alvin McGowan is over there, and Zenon Tekzarni. And of course, our vice chair, Tim Quinn. And former longtime board member and my mentor, really, when I joined the board, Gail Altman. I'd be remiss if not mentioning Gail. And Princeton's senior planner, Justin Lesko, is also here. He and his boss, planning director Michael Laplace, will be working intensively with our consultant team on the master plan update, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. What I want to do in the next 9 minutes or so, and I know that's a chunk of time, so I'll try to be concise, is to briefly explain the planning board and its responsibilities relative to the master plan. I can take this off to speak, right?
Yes, sure.
Feels a little weird, and plus my glasses get blocked. And also provide a preview of work that will unfold over the next 12 to 15 months. The planning board and Princeton Future share a lot of interests and goals, and yet our roles are fundamentally different. The planning board, as many of you may know, is a quasi-judicial entity whose powers and jurisdictions are set forth in the state's municipal land use law. Unlike in most states, New Jersey land use decision-making happens at the local level, so a big part of what the board does is hear applications for development and redevelopment in town. Of course, we take that responsibility very seriously. But the most important thing the planning board does is develop and periodically update the municipal master plan. And in Princeton, it's known appropriately as the community master plan. It reflects a community vision and consensus, and forms the umbrella under which certain policies are implemented and laws enacted by mayor and council. In accordance with the MLUL, the master plan is made up of elements, sort of like chapters, maybe more like puzzle pieces. And Princeton's master plan has 9 elements: land use, housing, circulation, that's cars, bikes, and pedestrians, historic preservation, open space and recreation, conservation, green building and environmental sustainability, community facilities, and utility services. Some towns' master plans have more elements than ours, and some have fewer. The last comprehensive update to Princeton's master plan was adopted in 1996. The land use element was last amended in 2009. The utility services element and conservation element were amended in 2005. Community facilities in 2006. But that's not to say that planning and visioning has not happened at all. A master plan re-examination report was adopted in 2017 as required by law. Sustainable Princeton completed an outstanding climate action plan, which was endorsed by council and is having a real impact on policy and ordinances. In 2018, the planning board revised the circulation element to incorporate recommendations relative to bike transportation. And in 2020, the board finalized and adopted the green building and environmental sustainability element, which will influence all other elements as we move forward. Also in 2020, we adopted the housing element and fair share plan, memorializing Princeton's affordable housing plan through 2025. The council has established areas in need of redevelopment, and the town has carefully studied the Nassau Street and Witherspoon Street corridors. So, no shortage of planning activity. And in fact, I'm betting half of you can think of plans that I haven't mentioned that have happened in the last 20 years. But there's been no comprehensive community-based master planning in 25 years, and a whole lot has happened in that time. Before she retired from the planning board last year, our longtime chairwoman Wanda Gunning stressed the importance of updating the master plan, and she directed the board's master plan subcommittee to get it moving. After a competitive RFP process and a series of interviews, the subcommittee recommended engaging a consultant team led by Clark Caton Hintz to coordinate the update. This past Monday, Council approved a professional services agreement with Clark Caton, so we are at long last poised to begin the work. And there is a lot of work to do. Interesting, exciting, challenging work. The consultant team, led by Michael Sullivan and Emily Goldman at CCH, also includes Susan Blickstein, whose firm will lead and facilitate extensive public and stakeholder engagement, and JGSC Group, Joe Getz's firm, in case you know him, to analyze economic and market conditions and opportunities. The initial phase of the work, the next 2 to 3 months, includes convening a steering committee, gathering all manner of documents and reports, mapping geospatial data, building an online engagement hub, and conducting the economic analysis. After that will come roughly 6 to 8 months of robust, wide-ranging public outreach and engagement in the form of surveys, interviews, forums, and other face-to-face exercises, and also through a host of online tools. We intend to reach deep into Princeton, engage a wide variety of people, all of you in here, of course, and also a great many out there of all ages and backgrounds who maybe never heard of the planning board or Princeton Future, but who live here, often work here, and have a keen vested interest in how the community will continue to grow and change, even as we respect and preserve and reckon with our rich and complicated history. I expect there will be work groups established to drill down on topics that mirror the plan elements, and meanwhile, detailed studies related to stormwater and environmental resources need to be completed so as to inform the updated plan. In the third and final phase of work, and this is taking us well into next year, the findings, consensus vision, and recommendations that emerge from the public process and studies will be incorporated into a fully updated community master plan. Throughout the process, the Planning Board, and especially our Master Plan Subcommittee, chaired this year by Tim Quinn, our Vice Chair, will receive updates and offer guidance and feedback at our public meetings, which happen the first and third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. And for now, those meetings are still happening on Zoom, and the link is easy to find through the municipal calendar on the princetonnj.gov website. The projected time frame for all this work is 12 to 15 months. It might take a bit longer, but maybe not. And when it's finished, I believe the community will be proud to have created a master plan that is clear-eyed, pragmatic, fact-based, and also ambitious and visionary, and one that provides concise, action-oriented guidance for fully realizing and implementing the plan. So the timing of this forum is good. I want to again thank Princeton Future for the invitation and for doing what you do. I like that you focus like a laser on smart growth and get creative juices flowing, and I love Dome Alley. And I'm sure that I've been clear about the responsibility for updating Princeton's master plan resting with the planning board, but I also want to emphasize that the board understands and appreciates and values Princeton Future's intense interest in the process and the outcome. We are eager to hear all ideas and insights, all the hopes, dreams, desires, and concerns that are shared here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. All right, so the last time this group met was about 2 years ago. And what was really interesting about it is that the day that we had this, I think it was February 19th, that day COVID began. And since that time, there has not been another public meeting like this. So this is really like a kind of an anniversary hooray for us. Finally, we can meet in person and look each other in the eye. Now, what was really interesting about that is that one focused on essentially the Franklin Avenue project. And it was really a very energetic presentation that various people made. This room was completely packed with people at that particular point in time. And so one of the things that came out with that is that for 9 months after that, it facilitated months of architectural collaboration, developing, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different plans for the Franklin Avenue site, lots of discussion, but the basis and the objectives of starting that plan came from the public, giving us the input to be able to allow us to create these plans and follow those sets of objectives. And so that actually came out in a series of documents that came out called Listening to Each Other. I mean, we really think that that's really a critical factor, to be able to find out what it is that you guys really think. Now, we've had, most recently, you all know Marina Rubino, right? Where are you, Ruby? Yeah, I mean, she had the walk to coffee last Sunday was really remarkable, and we had talked about it, and she introduced it to the board to say, let's get people walking. Now, it's kind of interesting, of course. You know, I had predicted years ago that we'd see $7 a gallon gasoline, which I think we will. The last time we had an energy crisis like that, mass transit increased remarkably, and people walked more. So the question is, her timing, I think, on this is really incredible. And of course, we're looking for more ambassadors to be able to have more of these walks through different portions of Princeton. So, and it was really interesting because I think you saw it in the paper, but what was really kind of fun about it was that there were so many people, 45 or so people, who showed up on a Sunday for this walk. Now, as I said, this really is about community listening more than anything else. And, you know, Louise has just really gone through the elements of the actual plan itself. But one of the things that I don't think she said, but I may have missed it, is that the first part of a plan are the goals and objectives. What is it that we want this place to be, and what are the fears that you have about it? The goals and objectives start to inform the rest of the plan, as far as I know. And of course, there's state statutes that said the community master plan is a framework. But one of the key factors, as all of you probably know, is that there used to be a borough and a township here. And the existing zoning still is borough and township. It's never been, for all practical purposes, congealed. It really cannot be congealed until such a point as a new master plan is done. And once the new master plan is done, it leads to then, how do you implement that master plan through zoning? And that becomes a really the critical factor. Now, the question that we asked ourselves is, what kind of a community do the people of Princeton want? And, you know, and what we wanted to do is say, we're not going to put any of the multiple sets of ideas that we've kicked around. We want to hear what you have to say. We want it before we even start to formulate this. And of course, the key here is, what's your hopes, your dreams, your desires, and your fears? I would really like to know that, as the rest of us would really like to know that. And what we will do is, this will be videographed today. We will keep this. We will look at your forms as they come back. And in the future, in April sometime, we will look at all of that and come up with a series of what did people say. And of course, the more this gets reached out, obviously, the better off we'll be. Now, I think the board fundamentally believes this. And of all the 400 visiting process that I did, just in the United States and about another 40 of them across the world, this is what I think we fundamentally believe, that no one knows this community better than the people who live, work, play, and do business here. These are the people who know this community best. And this is the input that you have to a community as complex, as beautiful, and as diverse as Princeton is. Now, the key is, I think, and it has worked every place so far, is that you can help plan and design this future. You know, leaving it alone, obviously, and Louise laid it out fairly well, it's going to be a lot of public engagement as a process, but we are hoping to be able to kind of kick this stuff, and of course, you can provide the valuable knowledge that we actually need. Now, the key is to summarize any of your responses on that piece of paper in front of you, but that's just kind of your notepad. There's the form. You each saw that, you each have that form, and again, we want to use that as notes, and we would obviously please like to have it at the end, because the end of this product we call the Book of Public Comments. What is it that people actually wrote and maybe didn't say? But everything you say today will be recorded and will be videographed. Now, it's time to listen to each other. Now, we want to hear from everyone, and it's nice because it seems to me the timing would be perfect for all of you to stand up at some point and actually give us your comments. But here's the rules: 2 minutes. Now, I'm going to do a thing that looks like this, but it's going to come up slowly. So I'm going to tell you when you start and when your 2 minutes are over. Now, think about it. A commercial lasts 15 seconds. A good commercial lasts 30 seconds. A long commercial lasts a minute, and an impossible commercial lasts 2 minutes. So the key is to concentrate your notion. It's got to be, it's not a tweet, but it's also very close to the tweet. So, who wants to start?
Good morning, I'm Jim Harford, and I am the person who came to one of the future meetings prior to that last one, in which I asked Kevin Wilkes 2 questions. How much money does this town get from rattling change out of people's pockets to fill the parking meters? He answered that question: it's irrelevant. I then asked, how much money do you get from parking tickets? He said, I don't have that answer. Now, I want that answer. And I'm going to go back to this quickly. My goal is for Princeton to become the model of an autoless community. And I just want to say this. You're all familiar with Ruha Benjamin. She wrote a book called Race to Technology. I ask you all to read it and think about what she says in relationship what this town asks when someone from another class, town, race, whatever, comes to visit this town and has to figure out how much to pay.
Josh Lucinder, I live on Moore Street. I'm an architect here in town. First, I have to say forgive me because I actually have to leave in about a minute, so I'm going to be ducking out. But, I think that hopes and desires, I think Princeton has to continue to be the rich textured quilt that it has been. It's a mix of history and current architectural styles that reflects who we are as a community. Clearly, we can improve that. I think our community needs to strive to be more diverse. I think we should be encouraging opportunities for affordable housing. I know we've started in some ways, but we have to continue that. And thoughts and concerns. I think my biggest concern is NIMBYism. It seems so often that the reaction of people in this town is, they want to support things like affordable housing and support other things, but not in their community, not next to their property. And I think that's just immensely problematic, and we need to work around that, not be so myopic. And the next item that's a thought and concern is fractured community. I think so often we entrench ourselves in our own positions. We find it difficult to listen to other people. We have, business versus the residents. We have enough parking in town versus more parking. We have development, pro-development versus keep things as they were, town versus gown. We need to find more opportunities to come together. This is a good start. Thanks.
Alex Garcia. I think that's underlying a lot of pressure in the town, and the argument is basically our 2 views of town. I'm going to caricature them a little bit. In the early 2000s, I came to a Princeton Future meeting. I sat at the table with a bunch of developers who presented what they called a small city view of Princeton, the greatest city in New Jersey. That included developing the central business district, moving it down Nassau Street, because that's really the only way you can go, connecting the Junction up, densifying internal neighborhoods, maybe connecting it out to the shopping center. And that was their vision. And of course, the thing that they wanted against that was that the borough neighborhoods were in the way, and the biggest obstacle they listed was Princeton Borough versus Princeton Township. I'm not saying this view was wrong.
Get
At
closer
the
to
time,
the mic, please.
at the time that the consolidation happened, I went to council and brought this up. Are we going to be a small city where the old borough neighborhoods get swamped by the central business district? Or are we going to remain a small town? And that's really what's going on here. So I feel that one of these constituencies or views has a natural group that will show up at every planning meeting, at every variance meeting, and that is what you're seeing is a relentless push out. The other people who are working in this town and maybe are not subscribing to that vision feel like they need to watch the government all the time, and if they don't show up at a meeting, then their view does not get represented. So I've heard the smart growth, I heard NIMBYism, I've heard various mechanisms, I've had correspondences with Mr. Ryan about parking. These are all mechanisms to express a view of what the town and the city should look like. And I think it's a choice. So saying one is NIMBYism, there's nothing wrong with having a small college town. Calling it NIMBYism is not helpful. There's nothing wrong with proceeding with a small city. But the community should be on board, and whatever we decide should be presented not as manufactured consent, but really be up to the people. I would actually like to see a master plan with 2 plans, and then it goes to a vote. And then we see who wins, and then everybody is happy. People will lose, they've had their say. Thank you.
All right.
Good morning. I'm Olivier Brigaud. I'm living on Aiken Avenue. My field of expertise is energy storage applied to grid, the electrical grid. I just going to focus on one point that I wanted to say today. I think this municipality is extremely vulnerable to weather events, extreme weather events. Each time there is a storm, we are losing a lot of trees, we lose electricity. The last one, some people were without electricity for 1 week. I think it's extremely important that the municipality in their planning are including aspects relative to resiliency. It's extremely important. We can't depend on PSE&G. They don't do their job. The only thing they do is to chop our trees around the lines, and instead of putting the lines in the ground. In the end, it was already mentioned by Sustainable Princeton, but it's very important to have more and more community solar for the people who can't have solar farms on their roof. It's very important to have energy storage so that we can be resilient. That there is a municipality like Hopewell have already done it for their municipal services. They have a large solar farm and they have energy storage. That means if there is a storm, if the lines are down for a week, they can still function. So it's really important, I think, to take this into account.
My name is Patricia Fernandez Kelly, and I am honored to serve on the board of Princeton Future. I really want to thank Louise for really a remarkable presentation that was both inspiring and informative. I think that all of us want to work with you and with the planning board in order to get some of those objectives fulfilled. I do agree with the previous speaker that PSE&G does not do a great job, but and actually I remember being very upset fairly recently over that matter, but it recedes completely when I consider my most important priorities. I'll just read from my form. Please do not allow Princeton to become a gilded cage, a place only the very rich can afford. We all gather here regularly, as has been stated, and we always say the same things, but I see things going in precisely the opposite direction. Developers and private investors are turning our town into a redoubt of obscene displays of riches. We want greater diversity of class, race, age, etc. So whatever we can do to achieve those goals, please let me know. I want to serve. Thank you.
Dan Chamby. I am entering my 29th year as a resident of Princeton, and amongst the reasons that my wife and I started a family here is because we enjoyed both the socioeconomic diversity, as well as the racial and ethnic diversity that this town provides. And I'm going to echo what was just said a moment ago. My greatest fear is that this does become a gated community. And when we talk about affordable housing, I want us to think about not just affordable rental housing, but affordable homes for ownership. And how do we promote that? I don't have a good notion as how that might best be effective, but that is of critical importance because we recognize that as Americans, most of our wealth is held in homes. And if you are just creating rental housing, you're not allowing a community to establish strong and firm roots.
Hi, I'm Scott Alcott from Rayburn Drive. Thank you for your important work. It's my first exposure to it, and I think it's tremendous. Just quickly, in terms of hopes, I'd love to have a post-retail centric purpose for downtown. I think retail is challenged, and it's not going to get easier. And I think of arts and cultural center towns, Covent Gardens in the UK. I wish for people strolling and having a reason to be here, not just to buy clothes or something retail. I think the restaurants and the rest during COVID and the progressive ideas of streets and seating in the streets were tremendous. And getting that kind of purpose to gather and be in the community when we aren't buying stuff, I think is really important to keep the heart of the town alive. In terms of fear, I worry about lines of out-of-town cars showing up to buy weed. All right? I just don't think that's the brand that I wish for my village. And it's not about anti-drug or, I understand all the social benefits and purposes and tax dollars, but I don't wish for that to be our brand. I wish our brand to be something else. Arts, culture, diversity, gathering. I wish we had more liquor licenses and restaurants than people coming out of town to get their month's supply. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Minji Liu. I live on Wendover. I really echo the last speaker that he inspired me to speak up. Last year, if you remember, town council had a task force for cannabis task force, and they issued a report and recommend up to 3 cannabis dispensaries in town, and as close as possible, like 200 feet from school, and with no setbacks to parks, house of worship, and playgrounds and all that. So I moved to this town because of this kids and family friendliness of the environment. And now we all know the cannabis nowadays is really different from like 20 years ago with the high THC content without regulation. And we all know there are like tons of research out there. The dispensaries in town really increase the underage usage. So I want to know why, if the master plan can set up some guideline to really guide our town to still maintain our kids-friendly and family-friendly environment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Oakman. I live on Valley Road here in Princeton. And I've been involved with Princeton Future. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk and also the opportunities we will have to discuss the master plan coming up. I was just going to say, I think, when I think about hopes and desires and a master plan, I think about, what are our strengths and our assets and how do we build on those? And I think that, we've heard a lot of that already today. We do have a walkable downtown. We have great schools in Princeton. We do have diversity, though it's challenged in many ways. We have strong institutions. These are some of the things that bring people to Princeton, and I hope that our master plan will help us, support our businesses, support our downtown, encourage diversity, and let us plan to encourage diversity, and also invest in our schools, hopefully, with the participation of our local institutions. Just in terms of concerns, I think I would echo what Josh Zinder said earlier and add to it that I think a concern of mine is sort of a pervasive fear of change that sometimes you see in town. And I think when we think about affordable housing, for example, like the Mount Laurel process, like that's an example of a situation where if you don't embrace change and plan for it in a positive way, you end up having to accept change that you may not want and is not planned. And so I think this town has done a good job of, for example, planning for affordable housing, but it's a reminder that if we don't embrace change and have a master plan that allows us to do that, I think we'll end up with a town that we're not as happy about. Thanks very much.
This is a great opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for Princeton Futures. My request is very simple. I work out every day, and I'm worried about the traffic. Every day I go out and I say, ooh, I hope I make it home safely, because we have traffic lights, and we have crossing areas where we should be safe. However, cars do not always stop. And it is really quite dangerous for bikers and walkers. Another concern I have is adults riding their bikes on the sidewalks. I don't mind children or senior citizens or someone who needs to be on the sidewalk, but adults should not be on the sidewalks on their bikes. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Bernice Chen from Brayburn Drive. I grew up in Princeton, went through elementary through high school, and moved away for several decades and returned just about 10 years ago. And I also work in town as an architect. My greatest hope for Princeton is for it to be a vibrant and energetic community that preserves our rich heritage while looking forward and not resisting change, growth opportunities to attract businesses, to create a vibrant downtown, and to grow in smart ways that are appropriate to the transportation needs of today, recreation needs, and needs for different types of housing from what was appropriate in the past. That is what I hope for the future of Princeton. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Grace Zhang. I live in the Riverside community. So I don't speak that much, but I mean, I wish to speak out this time because I have hopes and concern here. My hope is for this town is like continue to become a world-class town with multiple cultures and healthy environment and excellent education provide to our children. And I want to be the master plan to consider all this. And my concern right now is I will echo my friends and this gentleman's concern that recently the township want to introduce the idea or a plan to have the cannabis dispenser in town. As my friend told that is up to like 3 of them and can be as 200 feet close to the schools. And I'm very concerned about that because a lot of studies show that it's bad for the children, and because if the children pass the stores every day, they're seeing it, even though they are not allowed to have it. Still, it's a great threat to their health and well-being to me. I don't want the Princeton, after 25 years later, regret to have the marijuana shops in town. And I think that we should not, the township and our residents, should pay attention to this and raise our concern. Because as far as my concern, our town should raise the next generation of Einstein and Martin Luther King, not next generation of job addict or any kind of substance addict. And also, in terms of traffic, and I don't want to, because of the shops, the marijuana shops in town, and we attract tourists, but maybe that the tourists is not we want, it's
Okay,
not,
I'm
you know,
sorry.
it is something like addict.
I've got to cut you off, I'm sorry.
Okay, so, thank you. And
Princeton Future for this opportunity to collect hopes and desires of the community, as well as concerns. I am a 22-year resident of Princeton. I live in the I guess is the Middlebrook area. And I would like to reaffirm, in terms of hopes, I would like to reaffirm the high priority of something that has been on our master plan forever, but remains unfulfilled and pretty much off the radar screen of our planning efforts, and that is the priority of the community center that would serve as a unifying framework to address community needs in concert with all other local organizations serving our collective social, cultural, health, and well-being. And fortunately, the council has created a task force to address the feasibility of such a center, and we hope to, I'm part of it, we hope to make some recommendations pretty soon. In terms of my concerns, as has been reiterated several times already, the growing gap between haves and have-nots in our community, as in the world around us, is particularly startling here in Princeton because we have such a wealth among us, and also such dire areas of need. And this is particularly so among our underserved youth, and this is where I think we should be focusing and where we would be getting our highest return on investment. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tom Pinio. I live on Van Deventer Avenue. I'm not super concerned about any one particular ingredient of whatever this turns out to be. My hope is that we are a thriving something. My fear, and I'm not one who's generally motivated by fear, but I would say I'm more motivated by fear in this case than actually by hope, is that we do not become a watered down semblance of nothing in particular. I look to you, Tony, and ask if this kind of a process can be successful, where planning, which is going to take place at a certain rate, can it sync up with change, which will take place at the pace of opportunity, right?
Right.
I'm wondering about planned versus organic growth. I'm thinking about all of the places that I've lived and loved in different parts of the world. How have they grown? I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of things like historic retention. As a builder, I know there's more than one really good solution to almost every design challenge. I do know that we get into a lot of trouble when it becomes sort of a mashed up Frankenstein of nothing in particular. So I also, to your point about no one knowing the community better than the residents, that may be true, and I would want to make sure that those who show up and talk are a reflection of the community.
Hi, I'm Lee Rugo. I live on Aiken Avenue, and thank you for everyone's comments. They're all very inspiring. We chose Princeton. We had a choice when we moved here from Europe, and we raised our daughters here. They had an idyllic childhood. Even their high school years. From the time they were in school here, there were 19 children from one corner to the next on our 2-block street. So just one block of Aiken Avenue was 19 children. They played in the streets all the time after school. You can be invited to someone's backyard, and that's always wonderful, but the street was an equalizer. It was a wonderful place. They played games, they rode their bikes and other gadgets they had. They drew with chalk. Those kids are all still friends today. It was an idyllic community. I wish that for all future residents in Princeton. I also want to talk about curb appeal. I think what PSE&G is doing to the trees is just butchering. And I would like to see all utility lines underground and not at the cost of the residents.
My name is Kathleen Carroll. I live on John Street. I think that we are already classified as a small city, so I think that is kind of a silly debate. But as we densify more, for many reasons, I think that's what's in vogue with city planners, et cetera. It helps maintain walkability. But as we do that, I think we have to devote more of our space to pedestrians so that they're comfortable and it kind of offsets the densification. So I also want to see more bike paths and safer bike paths. I would like to see an indoor public gathering space, so I'm glad to be reminded of a community center that's possibly in the works, so that's nice to hear about. I would like to see a healthier central business district with more businesses catering to residents as opposed to the visitors. And just in general, when, I guess this is a zoning issue, but having more space between sidewalks and buildings, because I live on John Street, so Witherspoon is kind of one of my thoroughfares, and several buildings in the last few years have been built directly on the sidewalk, which I think is a problem because we need wider sidewalks. So my concern is the traffic disaster that's developing at Chambers and Nassau, which is going to get worse as the hotel construction proceeds. So let's see, and I am concerned that these meetings get hijacked by very narrow interests like the cannabis thing. The council's given many opportunities for feedback on that. So take those opportunities and let this be a more general master plan meeting.
Yeah, I agree. This should be a more general meeting. And I've lived here for 24 years in Willowbrook section. And I have to say, I'm sorry I don't have solutions because I feel like everybody in the end wants the same thing. And what they want is to have comfort in getting from one place to another in town. Being able to go to Arts Council, park there. There's no parking. Being able to go to other places in town, like play tennis. There's no tennis courts anymore because they were given to PTP. We're taxpayers here. Our taxes have been going up, and that's the trend. So you expect better living conditions and just more comfort. It's a beautiful town with so many things. Of course, a lot was taken during COVID. But I feel like there's so many things to take advantage of that more people would have taken advantage of if it wasn't so inconvenient. It's just inconvenient. Everything is packed up and the streets are narrow, and if you're late to your parking spot by 1 minute, you get a $45 ticket. If your car is touching the line because the person in front of you parked far ahead and you didn't see it, you're getting a ticket. There's no leniency whatsoever. It's so cutthroat and stressful, like really stressful. It's honestly approaching like going to New York City or Philadelphia. Philadelphia is actually more laid back than Princeton. So I feel like this has to change, and it's been the same for 24 years. And people have spoken up about it, and it's been readdressed and readdressed. And I know that they know exactly how much money they're making from meters, because it's all computerized. You know, if you try to fight the ticket, I've been told, they actually get a written report from the computer when you pulled into the spot, when you pulled out, how many coins or what credit card or how much money you put in. So that's nonsense, and it's going on in a lot of other towns besides Princeton, I know. But maybe we should be the innovative ones to change it, or find like a smaller compromise that makes.
I'm Gary Patton, I live in Trinity Court, and I have a different perspective because I've lived here for less than a year. So I came today not only to listen, but also to learn. And I moved to Princeton when my wife died, and my daughter and her family live here, and to be closer to her. But I've urged people for a very long time, when they consider retiring, to move to a college town. It's manageable in size, and it's filled with arts and culture. And so I was delighted to move to Princeton. And it's not enmeshed in New Haven like Yale. It's not enmeshed in Cambridge like Harvard. It's distinctive, and it's great to be here because it's so manageable. It's everything I wanted, and the arts and culture are just simply great here. And I would hate to see it become a city like New Haven or Cambridge or Harvard or Yale. It's distinctively different, and I really appreciate it.
So, when my wife and I moved to Princeton, we're both faculty at local universities, and what we found was that it was really hard to find a place that we could afford, and that's insane. Like, if it's too expensive for college professors to buy a place in Princeton, then what hope do regular middle class people have of finding a place to live here? I think that, you know, we really have to consider our existing master plan as having completely failed to deliver the kind of housing stock which is necessary to ensure a diverse town. And when I'm thinking towards the next 10 or 20 years, there's going to be a great drive to, you know, create new sustainability standards, and there's also a drive for historic preservation, and those are really important things. But you know, while we're trying to like protect things, we also have to try to allow the things to emerge which we need to ensure a town which is going to work for everybody. So I think that one of my key hopes of the master plan, which is coming up, is that it will provide for the kinds of zoning changes which will allow a greater diversity of housing types to be built in Princeton. So for example, just to take one example, if we look at like the Witherspoon John neighborhood, everyone I think agrees that it is a terrific neighborhood. So walkable, affordable homes which regular people can own. It provides a big stock of housing for the minorities in Princeton, which is really important. But you can't build Witherspoon John style housing anywhere else in Princeton. It's literally illegal. And because it's illegal, then you know anyone who's moving to Princeton who is looking for an affordable home is going to like pick over that neighborhood, and that's going to drive gentrification in that neighborhood. So we need to allow more housing, like a small footprint in more parts of town. That's what people are doing in other cities around the USA, and I think that really should be a key priority for the upcoming master plan.
Hi, I'm Marina Rubina. I'm an architect, and my other area of expertise is I'm a parent, and this is where this comment comes from, that my hope in our master plan is that we provide housing options that allow freedom for our children to be independent, for our children to be walking to places by themselves, walking to school, walking to activities, which by extension allows mothers, Sam was the example, it's mostly mothers who will then have the freedom to not chauffeur their children around, but do other things and achieve other things in life. My greatest fear related to that is that these master plans last for 20, 30 years, as you can see, and the people who will be here in 20, 30 years, here's an example of Sam's kids, are not involved in this process. And this is my hope, and Princeton Future is working on initiatives, and I hope everyone who has in their families people who will be here in 20, 30 years, and if there are 5-year-olds, 15-year-olds, please get them involved, connect them to us, that we would like to have them part of this future planning. It's really, really important that they have a voice. And the last, I would like to really echo what other people were saying, is that let's plan and organize the master plan, visioning for things that we do want, rather than for things that we do not want, right? Many people are expressing the same ideas in very different ways. If we envision what our town is going to be a cultural center, that we can dream and we can open up possibilities rather than just saying, I don't want this, I don't want this. So I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Libby Zinman Schwartz. I live in affordable housing in Princeton, and I wanted to hear as many people as I could before I had to say. I think that the person who initiated my own point of view is Dr. Ferranda. Yes. And,
EFK.
and she's right. I've lived all over the world. I lived in Vietnam for 10 years, came back not a long time ago. And it is a gilded cage. And I don't think in any place, city, town I have been in my life, have I ever found a more elitist attitude than here. All of you, or many of you, have mentioned expenses and wealth and costs that are out of league for most people, or for many people. So it's very, as a retired psychotherapist, I know how hard it is to change attitudes. But I think this attitude of elitism, which for me, from my point of view, begins at the university, at the very top, and filters down throughout the town. So I don't know how you change that. It's very difficult to change an attitude, but I think it has to begin there, and this town has to become more equitable and less elitist.
And I was listening to Mr. Pinio and some of the comments. If you go to the Facebook page, I grew up in Princeton. It seems there's a belief that the high mark of civilization here was somewhere around 1972. And as expressed by architecturally, small capes and split levels, okay? And I just want to encourage, as we talk about affordable housing and diversity, the impulse shouldn't be to govern preservation of 72, okay? There are architectural solutions. There's ways to move forward to have all of these dreams for affordable housing, for diversity, for different classes and heritages, but without saying we have to stop in the 70s. And I'm concerned about zoning that says the solution is to prevent progress and keep the high water mark to be 1972. Thank you.
My name is Shirley Satterfield, and I'm listening to a lot of people talking about diversity. I don't think I'm the oldest one here, but I think I've been in Princeton longer than anyone here. And I've got to sit down because my posture's bad. When I came back to Princeton, I didn't come back to be an historian, but it ended up being that way because I saw that not much had changed as far as integration and respect. I was in Princeton Future when I first started with Sheldon and Dr. Goheen and Dr. what's the other one? Getz, yeah. And so this is like deja vu with people talking about what they expect in their neighborhood. I grew up in the Witherspoon-Jackson community. I'm the historian for the African community. But people talk about diversity, and our community has become what I would say a commodity. Because now everyone wants to move in the Witherspoon-Jackson community because they say it's friendly and they have porches. Those porches had a purpose. No one has porches anymore. And I could walk down the street from my house to my church and no one speaks. I'm also concerned about the arrogance of people, especially with the traffic. I have been stopped on the corner of Nassau and Witherspoon Streets at least 3 times because people don't look at that hand. And if you cross, I've had a man stop in front of my car and stop me and yell at me and said that he's going to call the police. I said, call the police. In fact, I went down to the police station and I said, I'm going to turn myself in. And the reason I said that is because I was holding up other traffic, waiting for these men to let me go. And then another time, I saw a woman crossing the street. She didn't look. And I rolled down my window to say, please watch what you're doing. She put her middle finger up and said, F you. And it's a good thing that I had someone else in the car with me, because I almost got out that car to read her. So I just want to say that the arrogance has come back into Princeton. We're not as friendly as we used to be. And someone who said about the neighborhoods where the children play on the streets, that's what we used to do. You know, the children played in the streets, everybody knew everybody. So when we talk about diversity, when we talk about housing, think of those of us who have been here for years who can't afford to stay in our homes.
And she was cheerful and warm and welcoming and changed this town a lot. I just wanted to recognize Shirley. She served with Princeton Future for maybe 5 or 6 years. Anyway, you're terrific, Shirley. Thank you very much. I want to read something I received this morning as an email. There's a woman named Heather Cox Richardson. If you know who she is, raise your hand. She lives on the Maine coast, and she's thoughtful. She sat in the White House with President Biden 2 or 3 days ago, and she in front of a fire before he made his State of the Union message. And she wrote the following, which I got this morning, and I think it matters. She said, every day people write to me and say they feel helpless to change the direction of our future. I always answer that we change the future by changing the way people think, and that we change the way people think by changing the way we talk about things. That's what Princeton Future does. The word conversation has the beginning C-O-N. It means with. It doesn't mean against. It means with. Yaina's sitting here. She hasn't spoken, but we talk together for maybe 5 times a day for 5 years. We agree on just about everything. And we all need to work together to make this town more inclusionary and more sustainable. The guy who talked about the storms and burying the power lines is correct. This room in about 2 hours was flooded with water. I think it was Irene. It's amazing, and we haven't done anything about it. So there's an urgency. The climate's important, but inclusion is the big deal. I have a personal hope, and I'm trying to get my fellow board members to agree with me. Nobody agrees. But when a developer wants to come and build a building, a private owner wants to make more money, my personal view is that that person ought to get an encouraging waiver on the parking requirement and on the height as in direct proportion to the number of what I call non-market units that get built up to 50% of the units. And that essentially would be 30% out of 100, where people who serve the town, fire volunteers, teachers, police, get to live here at 30% of their income. 30% is fair. And this town is dying. And if we're not careful, it's really not going to be a working community anymore. Someone that, where Alice Satterfield knew everyone in town.
Yes, I did serve with Princeton Future for several years. I was here at the beginning also with Shirley, and Dean Geddes was the person you were also thinking of, who was one of the co-founders. And I believe the main tenet of Princeton Future, at least on brochures then, was diversity, affordability, and sustainability for the entire community. And it's not focused just on one. It should be for in all neighborhoods. And when I'm saying that, I mean diverse, affordable, and sustainable in all neighborhoods. At the university has tremendous growth, and it should really provide for greater housing opportunities for those in its expansion, place the pressures on our most affordable neighborhoods, because Witherspoon-Jackson is no longer affordable. It's for some, perhaps, but not for many. And as well as the commercial entities, that there should be diversity, affordability, and sustainability. This obviously would fall in the laps of those who are the NIMBYites, because everyone has to participate, contribute to, and make sacrifices for that whole to actually exist. It's not to be a development, sole development's responsibility to provide affordable housing, as one gentleman said earlier, and as many communities around the country do. It's infill. Everyone is in the affordable game and in a neighborhood that has affordability. My thoughts and concerns around our quality of life, I think for all of us, if we maintain that tenet, we would see a community that we could embrace even the changes that are necessary to create that, because it doesn't exist in every neighborhood. Witherspoon-Jackson, as Shirley said, really bears the brunt of affordability on the market sense in terms of home ownership, and therefore it's pushing a lot of people out. I'd like to see that we look at, as in Washington, Boston, scale as a predetermined. It does not conflict with what Sheldon just said. I mean, we have to have a ceiling on what growth is, but that we really look at our community in the future as amorphic, in that we know we can't stay at the two-level, 2-story, 2.5-story height on everything. With regard to sort of preserving some areas, I tell you, America's contribution to architecture was certainly not in the split bubble. It is, and it was, I guess, the greatest thing since sliced bread during the 50s, but it is not adaptable, and as you can see, many are attempting to, expand them, tweak them, and create something that is more livable for today's household. But it's not necessarily a design style we want to call historic. And during COVID, I found it very encouraging that when we didn't have the cars, yes, the streets became our own. And the children were allowed to play on Green Street. They did the coloring on the sidewalk. They had art parties. They played all kinds of games, and there were about 6 or 8 children who literally ran the streets. They had all their classes outdoors with each other, and it was like old times. And I think if we're looking at a community that we want to reduce that either need for or reduce our catering to the automobile, then we really have to make the pedestrian a priority. We make very short light changes in terms of the traffic lights. You know, this will certainly make us all cringe, but we want to give the priority to pedestrians in order, and other modes of transportation in order to maintain a life that's of high quality. We have increased, I think, opportunities for public transportation. And many talk about using European forms of public transportation, but rarely do they use it right here in our own town. And when my daughter and I first moved here, I had my little red cart, fold-up cart, which I never saw in this town, but we were coming from Boston, so we rolled that way. And we would go out to Nassau Park on the bus. I brought back the circular saw that I brought back a 3-foot tree that's now 40 feet tall, and did everything that I needed to do on that bus. And I saw many people who used it out of necessity, but didn't use it with a frown on their face.
Well, it's never good to follow Shirley and Yana, so let me begin. My name is Catherine Millett. I'm a resident of John Street. I'd like to begin by saying that actually I'm grateful for the past 2 years that I have lived in Princeton. I've talked to many people around the world, and when they say, how are you doing? I say, you know, I'm blessed. I lived in a wonderful community where we can walk to many things. We've been able to support our local, a lot of women-owned businesses, Women's History Month. And so I say that because I think that's very important for us to keep in mind, that there have been many wonderful blessings to be here, particularly for these past 2 years. I do have maybe a blue sky goal that we can figure out how to maintain some of the small town qualities of Princeton while becoming an exemplary small city for the US and for the world. And I do like the fact that several of you have mentioned that we can learn from places outside of the United States to think about what they're doing with the communities in which they live. Some of the concerns I have been echoed by others. The impact of climate change. That really came home to me with the September storms when I had relatives visiting from different parts of the country. My sister, who usually can make it to my house from 95 in 10 minutes, spent an hour and 30 minutes trying to figure out how to get to my house because of the flooding in various ways. My brother, who was coming from Connecticut, said it was the equivalent of coming through a war zone to get to my house, and that if he hadn't happened to randomly meet people who lived in Princeton, he never would have been able to get here. It made me think for myself, how would we have gotten down to the hospital? How would we have gotten to food? And what did it mean? And I have been lucky so far not to have lost power, but I want to echo the concerns that were raised about that. I do worry about housing being affordable as I age, and I do wonder if I will be able to afford to stay in Princeton when I get older because of the cost. Compared to some of you in here, I'm a relatively young resident of the John Street, Witherspoon-Jackson area. I've only lived here 18 years, but I do know I probably would not be able to afford the house that I bought 18 years ago, because back then I thought it was really expensive, and I know I probably wouldn't be able to do it now. I think we also, to Sam's part, we really do need to understand what the variations of the term affordability means in Princeton. We have individuals who really are living at the poverty level who we need to think about. But if a two-couple faculty family can't afford living in Princeton, who aren't the beneficiaries of housing from the university, I do think that is a very big problem.
Exactly.
And we hear that a lot, actually, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but in relation to the parking conversations, the people who say it's very difficult to be asked to think about incurring more fees. I worry about overdevelopment. As many of you know, we've seen that in the Witherspoon-Jackson area and the other neighborhoods that surround the downtown, again, 18 years ago when I moved, these were not very desirable places to live. People even said to me, why would you live there? Now, they're among the hottest neighborhoods, and we start to see some of the issues of the tear down and build up.
Yep.
And again, these build-ups, no way could I ever afford them. I feel like I'm seeing Architectural Digest when I walk down the street. I also do worry about the fact that we seem to see the same people at these meetings. And we're not seeing a lot of people, for instance, under 50. You know, it's funny, I've reached that part now, I'm like, where's people under 50? Never thought I'd get there. Very few are here, and it's really their town. And I also worry that we don't see people from all the neighborhoods. Because if we want a Princeton community that is for all of us, then we do need to have the people who live 5 miles out, who live, you know, in other places. But I am optimistic about this, but the one thing that I haven't heard about was what got done from the last time a master plan was presented, so that we can see what a plan put out, what was achieved, and also to understand maybe what didn't happen for a multitude of reasons. We couldn't find the money, we decided it wasn't the right way to go, in the end it didn't get public support.
Right.
But thank you very much.
So I'm not speaking for the board. I really do appreciate this meeting. It's good to hear people speak, and I just want to thank Princeton Future and Louise for the work that they're doing to think about and have conversations about where our community is moving. And I'll just echo what some people have said already, in that we are growing. People want to live here. We have people moving here all the time, and we want to make sure that there's nothing we can do to stop the growth, and growth is in fact, I think, good for us as a community, and we all want a thriving downtown, we want thriving neighborhoods, we want to know each other, we want to have a civil community where people are kind, and where people feel a sense of I think, belonging, and we want a diverse community, and we want people to be able to afford to stay here. I want my kids to be able to move back when I get older, but I don't think they can right now. I look around and that won't be possible. So I just want to say, in terms of from the perspective of what I've learned on the Board of Education, our community has grown over 10% in the last 10 years in terms of the schools. We know that there's planned growth that's been approved that will grow our residential housing by another 10% in the next 5 to 10 years. There's another round of housing that's coming that's mandated by the Constitution of New Jersey. That's another equivalent of 10% that's coming as of 2025. Builders will have a remedy again where they can come to town and say they can build just about whatever they want if we don't have a plan. So we all have to have another plan for affordable housing from 2025 to 2035. So we need to be planning as a town. Our master plan now is so old and out of date that the school part of the plan hasn't been updated for 20 years. It doesn't even accommodate the fact that we have a new library. I mean, a lot of it hasn't been done, and it needs to be done. So from our perspective on the board, I just want to say, and individually I'm explaining this, we've created a long-term planning committee for facilities. I'm chairing that, and we are hoping to cooperate with the master plan process. We have someone who's on the steering committee, because our dream as a school board is that we remember the schools and the other public services that we will need as we continue to grow, which we're going to do, and that we all work together and try to problem solve the challenges we have, because it's going to take all of us to be involved in that. So we have a long-term planning committee, which we're going to try to start making open to the public monthly, so that we can be looking at enrollment versus projections, so that big piece of the planning is more understood, and we're able to kind of watch that grow and do what we need to do to solve those problems.
Well, I won't repeat everything that's been said, but I'm in agreement with a lot that everyone said so far. I've only been living in Princeton for the last 8 years, so I'm not really familiar with the master plans, and, you know, I'll come to a few of these meetings, but what was said as far as, I work in corporate America, so what was said as far as, let's see what was done from the last master plan to now before we go on to the next, hit home, because working every day and reporting and having to be held accountable, that hit home for me, and I appreciated that comment.
First, I took prettiest copious notes on, I think, something of what everyone said. And it's good to be here, and I'm here at Lake Newland, a resident at 230 Birch Avenue. Just my observation of looking around here, I don't see many people from the underserved population here in Princeton. And I think the reason why that is, or perhaps could be, is because the average home in Princeton now sells for between $900 and $1.1 million. And I think that gilded cage, that gated community prompts and promotes indifference on the parts of many of us here in Princeton. The one thing that resonated with me was the gap in wealth here in Princeton that grows on a daily basis. There's not a lot we can do about that unless we really roll our sleeves up and address equity. And I just want to spend a couple minutes, or not a couple minutes, a couple seconds on equity. I think equity and social justice, we toss these words around, they become buzzwords, and I think most people think of them in terms of race. But I would ask people to stop doing that immediately. Equity and social justice is a general term that applies to every damn thing that we do and in every way that we do. With regard to some of the discussions as to our central business district and branding and what type of community we're going to be, what should be here, what should not be here, I would just like to remind all of us that the heart and the soul of Princeton is not in uptown, it's not in downtown, it's in the hearts and the minds and the souls of the people, all of us who live here. Last thing, the people that are here, we're not the problem. It's the people that won't take time to engage, to listen, to love, that don't come to meetings like this, that are the problem. So when you leave here today, take time to do a random act of kindness for somebody, anybody, just because you have time and the ability to do it. Because guess what? You got up this morning. And every day is truly a blessing. Why? Because it's a day you won't see, it's a day you haven't seen before, and one you most assuredly will not see again. Thank you.
I'm Chris Myers, 803 Princeton Kingston Road. I'm also, I've been here since the 90s, the late 90s, except for 2 years in grad school, and I really appreciate and love this town dearly. And I'm very profoundly impacted by listening to everyone in this room. I think this is a great direction to be having this dialogue. And one of the things that comes to mind, I don't want to be part of the problem. You know, going forward, I'm here to, you know, think about the things that are important to not just me, but this town. I believe in, oh, that's a bit louder. I believe in smart density. With the emphasis on smart, I think that allowing more dense infill will allow for some, but certainly not all, of the housing issues. I think the zoning code needs to be cleaned up. It's an addition on top of an addition on top of an addition that conflicts itself. Bike safety is something that's very important to me. Princeton Kingston has no sidewalks where I live, and it's just it becomes the Autobahn, and it's very dangerous for kids. I am a supporter of the Affordable 7 housing overlay getting passed. Beth has talked about the school population increase, and I think that needs to be planned for. Stormwater management planning, I'm interested in rain gardens over underground. Tom's my business partner. I share his view that respecting historic buildings doesn't necessarily mean keeping every building. Who said the split levels? Oh, okay.
A customer of Tom's. So.
Yeah. There's really some unhealthy buildings that we've come across, and it is very appropriate to actually take down some buildings, recycle them. We do that on a regular basis, and put something clean, green, efficient, more density that's possible. Let's see. I think about induced demand. Are we inducing more demand for parking by providing more parking downtown while not putting sidewalks and better bike lanes in place? Let's see.
Thank you.
I love the idea of maintaining outdoor dining. Let's see, more liquor licenses would be great to have more restaurants. And let's see, where are all the 20 to 35-year-olds also? I mean, we have a missing population in this town. I lived here during my 20 to 35-year-old range, and there's just not a lot of people then, and even less now. The prevailing front yard setback doesn't work in all areas. I think that's something to look at, and I think that's it.
Michael Floyd, I live on Harris Road. Spent the first 12 years of my life on Quarry Street. You know, got a postcard in the mail a few days ago about a house that sold down the street at Harris Road, right by the Valley Road School. Little modern at the time in the 50s, one story, $995,000. I can't imagine that that house will remain. It will get knocked down. It's not a design that you really expand on, and it didn't look like it could hold the second floor. So that's just a Princeton reality. I actually sit on the zoning board, so I see a lot of applications come by. There are a lot of houses in Princeton, in a lot of neighborhoods in Princeton, that are not as tall, not as big, square footage wise, as the zoning allows. I don't believe you will ever stop tear downs in this town, because there are a lot of, in the old days, people didn't build a lot of big houses unless you had really big money. So we could hope to somehow stop the tear downs, but it won't happen, I don't believe. And there is, as people say, the wealth disparity. And I want to dovetail to diversity, or I think Princeton is very diverse. My concern is more pointed. A little bit of what Shirley Satterfield was getting at is, if you look at the census, and I guess I would like somehow the master plan update will help this problem, but it really can't. The African American population in the previous census went down 39%. All other categories went up. In the most recent census, I believe, the African American population went down another 25 or 29%. So, I struggle with, we always hear about welcoming Princeton, and it is. It is. Diverse Princeton, it is. African American community is disappearing in this town. Now, how you can deal with that? Oh, well, maybe you build more affordable housing. Maybe, I'm not sure that's completely why people are moving here. Every major institution, company around this area is still working on diversity and equity. Meaning, they haven't hired that many people. And this has been forever. All right, let me go to planning. New urbanism, there's great ideas in there. New urbanism is not new. It's probably 30 years old.
Longer.
Longer. Yeah, I was gonna guess maybe 40 originally, but I moderate.
Longer.
Longer. So Princeton has pulled some of new urbanism in concepts. Yeah, people want to look at more. I was talking to Rich Ryan, and he kind of said, yeah, this organization, Princeton Future, is sort of leans towards urbanism, new urbanism. We'll see where this goes with the master plan. In general, the master plan has goals and objectives. They're 25 years old, but if you look at them, you're going to like all the goals and objectives, because that's how they're phrased. They're really optimistic things. Now, specifically what you change, I don't know. I hope everybody thinks about additional changes that you'd like to recommend to the group.
I'm Justin Lesko. I work in the town planning department, and I also live down Witherspoon Street. I'm 28 years old. Thank you. I feel old. But I have a master's degree in the accompanying student debt. I'm a renter in town on a government salary. So I'd be happy to talk about that perspective. But today I'm really here to listen. Thanks for having me, Princeton Future. For the next 12 to 14 months over this master plan, I'm here to listen as well. So please, if you see me walking my dog down the street, you see me on a bike and you want to yell out your car window, or if I'm sitting over in the plaza, please come up, tell me your ideas. I'm already blown away by everything I've heard today. Thank you to Mr. Nellison for his remarks at the beginning, as well as Chair Wilson and everyone else that has spoken already. I really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to this process.
Hi, my name is Emma Frigo. I currently live on Aiken Avenue. And I guess after a few comments of where are the people under 50, I feel called to speak. I'm 23, almost 24, and and I'm still educating. Well, I've been involved with Princeton Future, and I've also had an increased interest in urban design and planning. And so I'm educating myself on all these topics of affordability and sustainability, mobility in town. But I think what I can speak to most right now is just the quality of life for someone in their 20s and 30s in Princeton. I came home, after graduating college. It was the pandemic, so I've been in Princeton longer than I expected. Like many of my peers, I thought I would graduate college and then move to New York. And that's the thing, is that I've, in this time, grown a lot and also just had time to reflect on this idea of all my peers, dispersing, but there are still, people in my age category in Princeton. And a lot of my ideals for Princeton are inspired by, some European cities or New York. I also want to say my college experience at William & Mary in colonial Williamsburg. When I went to college, I actually thought, I got a few jokes. Oh, you're going to college in a colonial town, a historic living museum, it's going to be boring, or kind of old fogey. It actually ended up being, it's way more fun than Princeton. Colonial Williamsburg, I think partly because it is a tourist attraction, but the town constantly has programming. It has this awesome farmers market every weekend. Every second Sunday of the month, they have an art festival. So you get to see, artists in the community come forth and show their art. There's live music all the time. And even in COVID, the town made it work so that there was still a life and that the town was thriving. And then, there's 3 bars, not that much, but they stay open late. And I think in this time of isolation, I've really seen the value of public spaces where, young people and anyone of any age can connect and network and meet people. I don't want to meet people online. I want to meet people organically in person. And so what I see for Princeton is, and I know that there's, for example, there's some plans with Triumph moving into the post office. I don't want to sound like the youth who's preaching, I need more bars and liquor licenses, yes, but we do. We just need more opportunities for a town to not be asleep by 9 p.m. Exactly. And where my friends, whether it's early 20s, college students home for the holidays, or I've befriended people in their 30s as well, it's always let's meet in town. Some of them have to drive, some of us walk into town, and then where do we go? A and B, just there's less, affordable places, or I go and, do my fancy dining, or I go to taqueria, it's just kind of, there's no in between. And then lastly, well, honestly, those are my main points.
I'm on the board of Princeton Future. Look forward to everything that Emma does also at Dome Alley.
Yes.
And thank you for that, Emma. And in response to, like Floyd mentioned, the new urbanism, I think the best way to think about it is the old downtown. And if you go back to the towns that existed 50, 60, 100 years ago, you saw mixed use, you saw apartments above retail, walkable little town square and so on. New urbanism is stealing everything from the old downtown, which is good. Also, Franz Kotze, am I pronouncing the last name correctly, Franz? Thank you. Was here. I mentioned the dialogue that we've been in on permanent parking, and he mentioned the choice between the big city or the small town, and possibly have a referendum or whatever. I think that would be a really bad choice. I think Princeton would be a terrible big city, not built for it. And I think it would be a terrible small town. The gilded cage would be inevitable. The university is growing like topsy, and we can't stop it. And then Beth just informed us about the affordable housing changes in the next generation, the one that we're all absorbing one. And today, I think, makes news in a sense to tell us about this other one. I just had my head in the sand on that one. So, you know, another choice might be to take the best of both worlds. Thanks.
I want to mention that my colleague has just written a book called American Urbanist. The New York Times called it a marvelous read. Go buy the book.
We are going to synthesize everything that was said today and come back, we think, somewhere around April 23rd with another meeting, probably extending the listening sessions, but also beginning to simplify and condense what we heard today. And then the intention of the Princeton Future is to do another one May, September, October, and December. So we want to continue this process of open dialogue. Now, we're not sure exactly how that's going to interface with the master plan and their set of committees, and we don't mean to in any way step on the toes, but we really would like a collaborative dialogue. That's going to be really important, I think. So anyway, thank you guys for participating today. Leave your sheets on the table. They're equally important to us. And I want to thank our videographer, Chuck, for videoing it today, and all of you for your really insightful comments. Thanks a lot.